All right, let's jump right into this text because it is absolutely fascinating. For this explainer, I want you to step into the shoes of a meticulous halakhic timekeeper. Just imagine for a second that your entire job, your literal life's work, is managing the exact, down-to-the-minute transition of time. And we're not talking about normal everyday time here, but sacred time. We're looking at a text that tackles a very specific, almost mathematical problem. Let's call it the liturgical paradox. What actually happens when two distinct, sacred days directly collide on the calendar? It's a massive puzzle of overlapping boundaries, and honestly, the way these ancient scholars solved it is just brilliant. This immediately drops us right into the mindset of a true liturgical logician. Ask yourself, how do we measure the exact transition of time when two identical-seeming sacred days intersect? We're talking about a scenario where you've got this continuous, unbroken 48-hour block of sacred time. One holy day bleeds right into the next the second the sun sets. There's no regular workday in between to act as a buffer. So how do you demarcate that invisible boundary? How do you ensure the community knows exactly which rules apply at which precise minute? Well, to solve this, we've got to rely on two primary liturgical tools, and they function as absolute opposites. On one hand, you've got the shofar blast. Think of it as a loud, piercing alarm from a horn that publicly brings in a sacred day and tells everyone, hey, immediately stop all regular labor. On the other hand, we have the separation blessing. This is a spoken prayer, usually over wine, that concludes a sacred day, officially separating it from the incoming profane, regular work week. Basically, they're the starting gun and the finish line of secret time. Which brings us to a central universal rule, established right out of the gate in our text. It's a strict law of mutual exclusivity. The text dictates, where the shofar blast is sounded, there is no separation blessing. And conversely, where the separation blessing is recited, there is absolutely zero shofar blast. The text frames these two distinct liturgical actions as entirely mutually exclusive opposites whenever you're dealing with the intersection of a festival and Shabbat. You simply cannot have both at the exact same transition point. No way. So the crucial takeaway here is that they form a perfect liturgical inverse. It's really like an elegant mathematical equation, but applied directly to religious ritual. The structural relationship dictates that the presence of one transitional ritual absolutely requires the complete absence of its counterpart. It's a beautifully clean, logical binary that prevents any sort of ritual clutter. If you're blasting the horn, you're not saying the blessing. If you're saying the blessing, you're putting away the horn. Simple as that. Okay, so how does this equation actually work in practice? Let's run our first test case. We'll call this the upward transition. We're going to analyze exactly what happens when we transition from a Friday festival directly into Shabbat at sunset. Picture it. You've been celebrating a holy festival all day Friday, and as the sun goes down, boom, you are instantly stepping into the weekly Sabbath. 2 holy days back to back. The text tackles this collision head-on with a really clear, practical directive. It states, one sounds the shofar to stop the people from performing labor that is permitted on the festival and prohibited on Shabbat. And you know what? That makes perfect sense. During a festival, certain types of labor, like cooking and food prep, are actually totally fine. But the very second Shabbat begins, that labor is strictly prohibited. So, the shofar blast, it's absolutely essential here. It acts as an abrupt, community-wide auditory halt. It's an alarm bell yelling, stop cooking right now, the rules just changed. But hold on a second, we just brought in a new holy day, right? So why is the separation blessing totally omitted? Well, it's because we're experiencing what's called upward sanctity. We're moving upward in our hierarchy of time. We're stepping from a day of lesser sanctity, the festival, where a bit of work is allowed, up to a day of much greater, stricter sanctity, Shabbat, where no work is allowed at all. We are literally climbing the ladder of holiness. And that brings us to a really strict, logical, legal parameter outlined in the text. It explains that the separation blessing is only ever recited when moving from a sacred day down to a profane, regular day, or from a day of greater sanctity down to lesser sanctity. So doing a separation blessing here, it's just logically impossible. It is strictly reserved for a downgrade in holiness, not an upgrade. You can't separate yourself from holiness when you're actually stepping deeper into it. When we map this all out, it reveals the first half of our logical proof. Moving from a festival into Shabbat requires the shofar blast to stop labor, but there's no blessing required because we're upgrading in sanctity. There's literally nothing to separate from. It's a clean, logically sound outcome that perfectly follows our rule of mutual exclusivity. Okay, but what happens if we completely flip the script and reverse the timeline? Imagine
A festival occurs immediately at the conclusion of Shabbat, on a Saturday night. This is our downward transition. That continuous 48-hour block of holiness, it's exactly the same. But the chronological direction of the sanctity is flipped. We're starting at the absolute peak and stepping down.
Let's break down the logic of this downward shift. First, all labor is already completely halted by the strict, pre-existing rules of Shabbat. Second, because of that, there is absolutely no new labor to stop as we cross the threshold into the festival. Therefore, the shofar blast totally loses its primary function. I mean, there's no logical need for an alarm to stop work when nobody in the community is working anyway, right? So the blast naturally just vanishes from the equation. And our source text confirms this perfectly. It explicitly states, on a festival that occurs at the conclusion of Shabbat, one recites the separation blessing, but one does not sound the shofar. Because we're stepping down, moving from the ultimate, greater sanctity of Shabbat to the slightly lesser, more permissive sanctity of the festival, the separation blessing becomes mathematically and legally mandatory to mark that exact downgrade. Thinking about this completed picture brilliantly illustrates the flawless symmetry of the text's foundational rule. Festival into Shabbat? Yes to the blast, no to the blessing. Shabbat into festival? No to the blast, yes to the blessing. The inverse relationship holds completely true in reverse. It's a watertight system of liturgical logic that leaves absolutely zero room for ambiguity. However, and you knew there was going to be a however, in the world of legal texts, solving one problem almost always creates another. This downward transition creates a highly unique linguistic problem that the text now has to resolve. Think about it. If we absolutely must recite a separation blessing on a Saturday night that flows directly into a festival, what exact formula of words do we use? How do you verbally separate 2 days that are both inherently holy? See, normally a Saturday night separation blessing uses a standard formula. It goes, who distinguishes between sacred and profane? And that works perfectly when you're separating Shabbat from a regular Sunday work week. But we obviously cannot use the word profane here because the incoming day is a sacred festival. It's not just another Sunday. So the text demands a hyper-specific substitution. The baseline requirement becomes reciting who distinguishes between sacred and sacred. But then we get this incredible, meticulous addition from a scholar named Rabbi Dosa. He isn't satisfied with simply saying sacred and sacred, because to him, it lacks accurate hierarchy. He introduces a perfectly precise, highly logical variation to capture the exact mechanics of this specific transition. He argues the formula must be who distinguishes between greater sanctity and lesser sanctity. Stacking these formulas side by side lets us truly appreciate the meticulous linguistic gears turning within this halachic timepiece. You've got the standard sacred and profane for a normal week, the general collision formula of sacred and sacred, and finally Rabbi Dosa's razor-sharp logical precision, greater sanctity and lesser sanctity. It perfectly and accurately describes that downward shift we mapped out just a minute ago. All of this leaves us with a really profound final thought about human agency and the structure of our world. If the passage of time is just a continuous, invisible flow, how much power do our meticulously chosen words have to actually structure its reality? These ancient scholars completely understood that our precise liturgical tools, whether that's the loud blast of a horn or the exact syllables of a separation blessing, they don't just passively measure time, they actively construct its sacred boundaries. So it really makes you wonder, what invisible boundaries are you constructing with your own carefully chosen words today?